Maybe we could go ahead and get started. We might get a few more people, but we're a few minutes after the hour. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on. I'd like to provide you today with some information about ARM and the ARM mobile facility, which is the subject of a current call for proposals, and the process associated with that call. I'm Jim Mather. I'm the director for the ARM facility. I'm joined today by Nikki Hickman, who's the associate director for operations, and Heath Powers, who's managing the mobile facility that is the object of the current call for proposals. Let me share my screen. Let's see. Coming through okay? Okay. So what I'd like to do today again is to provide information about ARM in this current call. And what I'm going to do is provide a little bit of background on the ARM facility. Then Heath will follow up with some specifics about the mobile facility that is the subject of this current call for proposals. And then Nikki's going to wrap it up with information on the process for going through that call. I think most of you are familiar with ARM, but ARM is a user facility operated by the Department of Energy. We provide atmospheric observations to serve the research community. A little bit about the facility. We've been operating now for 30 years as of this past May. We primarily provide ground-based measurements in a network of 6 observatories, as we call them, and I'll say a little bit more about those in the next few slides. But we also augment these ground-based measurements on an episodic basis with both piloted and uncrewed aerial measurements. These measurements are supported by extensive data management infrastructure. We process all of these data to standard formats and make them freely available to anyone. We also have begun providing large eddy stimulation model runs associated with select observatories to better link the ARM observations to larger scales. And which reminds me that I should note that there's a couple of objectives of the ARM facility and the science we support. It helps to advance science related to climate issues, and particularly to advance the climate models that are used to simulate climate. And finally, I want to note that we provide support for field campaigns associated with our observatories. And this could be as simple as hosting a single instrument at one of our observatories, but up to deploying one of our observatories, as is the subject of this call, or one of our aerial assets. So a little bit more about our facilities and getting into the mobile observatories. All of our observatories includes an extensive set of instruments for measuring the background atmospheric state. And you see here radioson providing profiles of temperature, humidity, and wind, surface energy balance for radiation and heat fluxes, aerosol and hydrometeor profiles via active and remote and passive remote sensors, in situ measurements of aerosol properties, and again, aerial measurements on an episodic basis, providing measurements of temperature, the atmospheric state, cloud properties, aerosol properties. On the right here in this map, you can see locations where ARM has deployed or is still deploying observatories. We currently have long-term observatories in Oklahoma, operating for 30 years, in Ukqiagvik, Alaska for the last 25 years, and the Azores for going on 10 years. Previously, we operated for nearly 20 years in the tropical Pacific. These gray dots represent, for the most part, mobile facility deployments. So these are observatories which contain these same extensive set of measurements, but they're deployed on a proposal-driven basis for shorter periods of time, typically 1 to 2 years. And again, that is the subject of this current call is for the deployment of one of these systems. The aerial facility includes several components. There's a fixed wing crewed aircraft, which is currently being modified. We expect that modification to be done in about a year. We also have an uncrewed aerial system, the Arctic Shark, pictured here in the bottom left. This has begun operations last year at the Southern Great Plains. We expect to fly several missions again at the Southern Great Plains in the coming year. Neither of these two aircraft are part of this call. However, we also operate a tethered balloon system, or several tethered balloon systems. It has a capacity of about 100 pounds. We've deployed it at 4 or 5 of our sites at this point, most recently at our Houston and Sale mobile facility deployments. And it is permissible to propose to deploy the tethered balloon as part of this mobile facility call, although I do want to point out, because of some of the characteristics of this upcoming call, and particularly the fact that it will be preferentially associated with an urban deployment, there will have to be review of where this can be deployed. Supporting all of these data are, again, extensive data management infrastructure. We have over 450 instruments that we operate, have collected over 3 petabytes of data. And so we provide tools for the discovery and retrieval of ARM data. These have evolved over the years, are available through the ARM website. And additionally, to manage some of the larger data sets, we have implemented computing capabilities to process larger data sets, including model runs and some of the larger observation data sets. And those are available on a proposal-driven basis on the data tab on the ARM website. So there's a lot more information about ARM that you can find at our website. So here at www.arm.gov, information on field campaigns, and you'll hear more about that from Heath and Nikki coming up, but you can find that on the research tab on the ARM website. If you have questions for us after this session, at the footer of every website, every webpage, there is a Ask Us link where you can submit questions to ARM staff, and we'll track those questions, get back to you. There's also a link to organization where you can reach out to specific individuals, leaders for particular measurements or field sites, etc. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Heath. And I guess one thing I forgot to note, I want to call out here, and thinking about all of our order of 20 mobile facility deployments we've done over the years, they've all been fully unconstrained. So we've considered proposals for any location that might come in. Now, some might not be possible, but we accept any proposals. This particular proposal call is constrained for the first time in a couple of ways. First of all, constrained to be within the United States or its territories, and there's a preference for deployment in an urban location, and that's spelled out more in the proposal page. But this is the first time we've done this kind of a constraint, and if there are questions at the end, we can talk about that. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Heath.
All right, let me see if I can get my sharing to go here, and see if I can turn this into.
Looks good.
All right, you guys seeing the right thing?
Yep.
All right, well, yeah, thanks, Jim, for the background on that. My name's Heath Powers, and I'm one of the site managers for a couple of ARM's mobile observatories. So the mobile observatories are what this particular call is about. And I'll tell you just a little bit about these. They really came about because ARM had invested in some fixed site locations and making long-term observations there, and really realized that the need to try and get out and collect observations from a more geographically and climatically diverse set of regions. So thus the mobile facilities were born. Currently, ARM has 3 of these. They are ARM Mobile Facility AMF 1, 2, and 3, very sequentially named. The first, as I mentioned, was really designed to deliver that really similar measurement capability of the fixed sites, but in a platform that we can move to different places around the world. The second mobile facility was developed with an intention to integrate it onto ships, and that basically allows us to make these really detailed observations on the surface of the oceans, which is a place that we really lack those types of observations. So the AMF1 and AMF2 have historically, been intended for about 1-year deployments, plus or minus a little bit of flexibility around the time. The AMF3 came about to give a sort of a mobile capability for longer term measurements on the order of 5 or more years, sort of bridging that gap between the shorter term AMF1 and 2 campaigns and the long-term measurements of the fixed sites. So as we said, these facilities really are trying to make the measurements that the scientific community has asked for, and they really parrot what's done at the fixed sites. But a comprehensive set of instruments for for some of our atmospheric state and radiation measurements that Jim was mentioning. Radio sondes are a critical part and a routine part of what we do. Broadband radiometers, spectral radiometers. Some profiling instruments for both the boundary layer and through and above cloud, energy balance, eddy correlation, and microwave radiometers for water vapor and liquid water path measurements. There's also a lot of emphasis on clouds and precipitation, of course, and we have a suite of remote sensing and LiDAR, radar-based instruments to do that, as well as ground-based precipitation instruments to capture precipitation characteristics. Also note there are some more complex instruments that ARM has, and in particular for this call, the scanning cloud radar are assets that ARM has that are available, but they don't automatically come with one of these mobile deployments. They are sort of a special request with adequate and good rationale for requesting the use of these for a campaign. There's also what we call an aerosol observation system, and that brings a payload of a lot of instruments really optimized to measure aerosol concentration, size, composition, lots of other characteristics, along with other things, some trace gases, and a number of a few instruments that are also available by special request. A popular one is this ice nucleating particle filter that again isn't a baseline instrument, but it can be available with justification. So where have these facilities been? They have really met the charge that ARM had in mind of trying to get observations from a really diverse set of locations. The mobile facilities have been to every continent on the planet. They've been to the poles, on the surface of the oceans. Lots of capability to get out to places where we don't have a lot of observations. I mentioned this here because, as Jim said earlier, this specific facility call is limited to within the United States or its territories. But that said, there's a lot of adaptability and configuration that these can do to get into, challenging places to measure. What is it that you get if you're awarded the use of the facility? Well, this is the fun part. This is you as the PI get the use of one of these observatories, and it that includes the the staff who plan and install the observatory to your field campaign that you've proposed. a lot of support staff within ARM to make sure that the data that we collect is high quality, it's optimized to meet your scientific objectives, and it's highly available. There's a lot of tools available for you as PIs to look at the data, to get quick looks at the data and see what's being collected, as well as a lot of emphasis goes to try and get those observations into ARM's archive that have been quality controlled and reviewed and ready for use. There's also several value-added data products that ARM invests a lot to produce for you, and you have you have input into this too. We have resources to help make sure that ultimately we're delivering the data that's needed to support your scientific objectives. I mean, ultimately, ARM's in the business of making these campaigns as successful to leverage as much science as we can from these. And so the more impactful that science is, the better for everybody. So for this current proposal, this is all on the website. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but you can see that pre-proposals are due December 19th. And that's for the AMF1, ARM Mobile Facility 1, available in the fall of 2024, sort of at the earliest. There are things that could push that date further back depending on complexity and things. This would be for somewhere in the neighborhood of a 1-year deployment. ARM has done deployments as short as 6 months, but this is sort of in the range of plus or minus 1 year. As we mentioned, this is meant to be within the US, but importantly, ARM is going to give priority to proposals that focus on BER's science investments, in particular these urban integrated field laboratories, IFLs, that have been announced in the last month or so, as well as some of the other places where BER is investing in modeling. I mentioned a few: Mid-Atlantic, Great Lakes, Puget Sound, Phoenix area. It looks like it just was awarded an IFL as well. So all of these are going to get priority consideration from ARM. And also, as Jem mentioned earlier, the tethered balloon system is a separate facility from these mobile observatories, but you are allowed, if you would like, to request the use of the tethered balloon as a part of this proposal as well. So check out the guidance on the website and ask questions. So I'm an operations person. My role usually is making sure that the hardware, this facility, gets to the location that you want and operates the way that we need it to. So I think it's important to talk about some of the siting requirements. These facilities are pretty sizable. They take a big footprint. You can see over here, this is sort of the area of the tracer campaign that the AMF1 has just completed. It takes a couple of acres to deploy these. There's lots of shipping containers that are our mobile laboratories, as well as areas that are needed for our field instruments. Now, ideally, things like field instruments need, if you look at Nikki and her background there, that's what they want to see: a completely clear horizon, 360 degrees with no obstructions. That isn't necessarily available everywhere, especially in urban areas, but that's sort of the ideal that we're working on. And of course, there's configuration and flexibility that we have with this, but just want you to be aware that there is a significant footprint sort of requirement for this. I think urban areas may present some challenges for this, depending on where we're going exactly and how we're measuring. As I mentioned, though, ARM has just finished up a mobile deployment in an urban area. Tracer was in the Houston area. And you'll note something here. I have 2 yellow circles. There were 2 major sites associated for the mobile facility measurements. One was near an urban area, sort of downwind. But there's a secondary site, what we call an ancillary site, that's really meant to capture some of the heterogeneity of these regions. And I say that because that's certainly in the cards. If that increases your ability to get successful science out of this, ARM will consider more than one site for these. here. The tethered balloon fur tracer was also a part of this campaign. It was flown at this ancillary site. I mentioned this because it's available to propose here, but I want people to at least understand that there are certainly are restrictions and a lot of safety and compliance concerns of operating the tethered balloon here. So keep some of that in mind. It's will be a lot of thought that goes into that. We have several folks who can answer questions on these things. I'm Heath Powers and happy to help you help answer questions if you have particular questions about citing this. I know it's complicated to find sites for these, so you have a resource, reach out to me. For tethered balloon questions, reach out to Derry Dexheimer at Sandia, who's an expert in this. She's the mentor for our tethered balloon for ARM's tethered balloon operations and can answer those questions. And lastly, I'll just say, if you are proposing near urban areas and again, we want to help you succeed, ask questions. It's also a good idea to think of a few different sites because every site may not work for various reasons, and to have a few contingency area sites is a good idea for this. So yes, with that, I will hand this over to Nikki, and she'll tell you about the process for proposing this and the ARM's field campaign process.
Hey, thanks, Heath. Let's see if I can do it. All right, can you see my screen? I'm trying to present now. Does that look okay?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay, well, now you already know who we all are. If you're thinking about proposing, you need an ARM account. So like Jim said, we have these footers that have a lot of information down there. One of those is create account. So if you don't already have an ARM account, go down there and create one. If you're not the PI on this also, and you really want to have one of these accounts, you can manage at minimum your subscriptions to our Atmospheric Observer, ASR News, ASR Working Group information. In addition to that, there's a lot of other things you can do, such as propose and get data. So we do ask a lot of information in there, but please understand that information is either required by DOE, it's part of our metrics, or it helps link to things like your OSCE publications and things like that. So it's not too bad, but just hang with us. We try not to bother you with asking information we don't really need. Other resources at the bottom of this footer, working with ARM data on that far right, when you're looking for how ARM does something or how to interact, there's actually a lot underneath there. So explore that a little bit. But also two of the things that I love is the acronyms list and the glossary. ARM has a lot of acronyms. We have a lot of instruments. We talk fast and we will sometimes gloss over the fact that everybody doesn't use the same acronym we do. So that is a really handy tool to have. And they're at the bottom of all of our web pages. So just be aware. For the entire proposal process or working with ARM, please never assume just ask us. There's this ask us button at the bottom here. In data discovery, there's a feedback button on the side. I believe it's on the side or at the top, but look on any of our ARM websites or data discovery, you should find a way to ask a question, and we're happy to help you. Started with noting our field campaign webpage. I did put a link that will take you here at the very top. There is the call information, and you can read more about the call. You can get information. One of the most important things when you click into that read the call, there is actually an instrument list and a VAP list. So we tell you what we're including already. That will also tell you what you need to provide additional justification for. So Heath noted typically sitting down an AMF is a 6 to 12 month situation. It could be longer, but you need to justify it. Shorter than that would be things like being on a vessel. So that would take specific information. This is what that call information looks like. Again, this is for a mobile facility. The proposals are due the 19th of December. So we hope you're working on this soon. We're looking at science of urban regions and climate interaction. In the US or US territories, there is a priority on urban IFLs. There's been an additional one mentioned that or awarded this week. So please check that out, but also areas of interest to BER and investment from BER. So again, read the call carefully. Don't overthink it. If something's confusing or you don't understand it, please just ask us. If you go to the campaign webpage, if you start at the top and go to the bottom, it will tell you how to propose. It will go through everything from please read all these instructions carefully, submit your proposal. Once you submit that, We need you to wait and be a little bit patient with this. Like Heath said, there is a lot that goes on under the hood that prepares. First, we look for deal breakers. We don't want to waste your time. So if there's something we can't do, we want to be upfront with you about that. We're not going to waste your time with something we know we can't do, but we will ask questions. For these large proposals, it's very rare that a PI will not have multiple questions that we need clarified before we can do our logistical review. Please respond to those questions. Once campaign is approved, we conduct the campaign, we work with PI, and then when it closes out, there's a couple things you need to be aware of. There is a final report that is required within 6 months of the end of the campaign, and we expect all guest campaign data to be submitted within 6 months of the campaign. Those are DOE requirements. We're in there with you. We just keep talking with us, and we find a way to get that done. We have different levels of campaigns. So today we expect we'll be talking mostly about the annual facility call, but outside that call, there's campaigns that can be from a single instrument to larger augmentations of our facilities. And so if you want information on those, please look into this small campaigns. This will tell you how early you need to ask us about these campaigns and begin the proposal process for these campaigns based on the level of effort that it's going to be. The level of effort from the PI is scaled based on the size of effort for ARM and the campaign. So like I said, the campaign page is descriptive and it's meant to be instructive. So if you follow it, you should be able to find what you're looking for. Like I said, the timeline also has an interactive timeline. You can put when you want your campaign to start, and this will tell you when you need to get your pre-proposal in. This is for the other campaigns, the annual facility call, like we said, December 19th, that's when you need to get that pre-proposal in. We do have a field campaign guidelines document. It's updated beyond the picture you see on the screen here, but if you click the link, you'll get the updated field campaign document. You can download that, highlight it to your heart's content. And again, if it's not clear, please just ask us. Scrolling down the page, we remind you of the timeline again, and there's a button where you can propose. This is the pre-proposal form. As you can see, it's not all that long. It's not that complicated. We need to know who you are. You need to be registered. We want to know what your science focus is. What's your plan? What resources do you need ARM to provide? Are there other collaborative things that you're already involved in? What funding efforts? Because we know that our funding cycle and other research funding cycles are not always aligned. We want to know what's involved there, what you've got going on, any guest instruments you know of. Please, when you're doing the pre-proposal, think about things that could be deal breakers. If there are really critical items, if there are things that are external that are really critical to the success of doing that, please make sure you put those in there. And like he said, you can reach out to us and talk to us before you put in the pre-proposal, and we'll discuss with you the best we can to figure that out together. I'm going to skip the execution part of the campaign on the website here and go to, we said we have multiple places for questions. You can reach out to the field campaign administrator anytime through this link. It's also afcadmin@arm.gov is the email, or you can click that Ask Us button and they'll all get routed to where they need to go, and we'll answer your questions the best we can, and we'll find someone in ARM to answer them if we're not the right person. There are, just in preparation for what you're getting into, there are templates in the guidelines. There are also instructions on what happens after something is approved, what you need to do at that point, what will be expected of you. We have links for data and metadata submission. Within here, this will tell you how to submit a PI product, how to submit guest instrumentation data. This applies for any field campaign, but for the large field campaigns too. And then acknowledging ARM. We do tell you how we would prefer to be acknowledged. This is for day-to-day use of ARM data, as well as if you're a PI of one of these large field campaigns, we really want you to understand this so you can share it with your co-Is and your collaborators. We have guidance on how to use our DOIs for our data streams. We provide the citations for the data streams. So we provide this on the campaign webpage, and we hope you're aware of it and spread that information. If your campaign is approved, like Heath said, we're going to bring the AMF. We're going to work on the siting. We will work with you on the siting. We want to make sure that we're setting this up in a way that is the best for the science that's being done for this campaign. We'll work with the host institutions, do the licensing, all of that work. We have a lot of things that we have developed in the last few years to 5 years that are meant to support PIs and our users. One of those is our field campaign dashboard. So this is something that will provide you not just an overview, but it'll give you our maintenance reports. These are customizable. These reports you see in the bottom left here, if there's something that you're going to do for your campaign that requires a daily forecast, provides information out to other groups within your science team, we can configure this to make those easy for them to find. We have quick looks plots that we provide for our instrumentation, but we can also provide those for guest instrumentation. You can work with us on that. Just communicate what you're thinking and where you're going with it. This will save a lot of people a lot of information or a lot of time. We hope we're not having you duplicate effort. We want to provide what we're already providing and let you spend your effort the best way you can. I did steal this slide from our plenary, but I want to note again, we have open source requirements. We have a couple of GitHub organizations that are meant to support our users. So as you prepare for this proposal, think about what you're going to want to do with your science team and your collaborators. We do have some areas that you could use for developing open source software. We support open source software with PyArt and Axe that are community code developed type software. We have open source software like our data integrator and our ARM diagnostics package for climate modeling. Think about these things. Think about the external data that you might also need to do your science that maybe isn't readily available. We might be able to connect to that to make it more easily available to you. One other little heads up, I mentioned the data and metadata submission. Next week, we're going to update our online metadata editor. And this, you'll see this change next week. And we hope this is something that makes it easier for you to interact with ARM and provide guest data, but also PI products. And so please keep your eyes open for that. That's kind of upcoming and fun. So just a reference slide here. I know the ARM campaign website in the chat. You can link that. That will pretty much take you to everywhere. The campaign notebook is also campaign dashboard. Sorry that I didn't keep that consistent, but this 5 tips for successful ARM campaigns. That is something I would suggest going. I'll try to put the link in the chat in a minute. For anyone that hasn't done a proposal, I would really highly recommend you go read that. It's not a very long thing, but it's something that gives you a pretty good idea of what past PIs wanted to share with the next PIs. So it's a very useful item. But again, if you don't know, ask us. There's a button at the bottom of every page. There's buttons on data discovery. We really want to help you be as efficient as possible with your time and what you're doing. And we want to help you do it in a way that it's successful in the end. I think the other thing I did want to note very briefly is if your campaign is awarded, we have a couple of different things. Most people have funding to participate in things like citing of the campaigns. Like Heath said, we start with something that's ideal. That is almost never where we sit down. It's almost never exactly how it works, but we go from that ideal and we come back off of that ideal based on whatever we run into as obstacles. So moving that, we do interact with the PI a lot to make sure, the PI and the co-Is, to make sure that what we're citing, the changes that we're making that aren't going to impact the science, or we can do it in the best way we can collaboratively. So if you don't have funding to do those things, there is a possibility to get some funding for that. This is not funding for your research, but if you have an issue with that, please go ahead and reach out to us. There's a little bit of guidance in the handbook, but the DOE program manager is also available to speak with you about that. So we just wanted to let you know that was something that was a little bit new and that has changed from the past. That's all my slides I have. I'll quit sharing and put this link in, and hopefully we have lots of questions.
Yes, there's been a few in the chat. I think we've addressed those. But if there are additional questions, you can put those in the chat, or if you could raise your hand. Very happy to try to answer those. How close does to an urban area does the facility need to be located? So there's really no requirements with that regard, or expectation. I think the only thing I would say is perhaps going the other way. To Heath's point, there may be some constraints on what we are able to do with some of the instruments, both in terms of permissions and space. I mean, it really comes down to, the science goals. I don't know if Sally or Shima, if you want to say anything about that, but I'm not aware of any specific expectation on how close it should be.
I mean, there's not a specific requirement or expectation, but the priority is for this solicitation for the AMF to be able to study urban processes and, be part of the new urban initiatives and the urban focus that BER is developing. So certainly you could be downstream of an urban area and look at, aspects of that. So as Jim said, it's about the science.
Thanks, Sally. Hey, Ken.
Hi, sorry, you might have addressed this at the beginning. I was in class, but if there's an instrument that we would like to request that is not part of the ARM facility but could fit with it, is there some special procedure to go through?
Yes, so we have, once we have an observatory deployed, there is a process for requesting guest instruments, and you could call that need out as part of your proposal. But we do, I think I did briefly mention this, we really accept a broad array of field campaign proposals ranging from the full mobile facility that we're talking about here to hosting a guest instrument. So we do that often. It's certainly better to know about it ahead of time so that we have some idea of whether we can support the instrument, but absolutely.
I'll note that there is a guest instrument field in the campaign proposal form. So we prefer you put it in there.
Is it okay? Chris asks, as a follow-up question, how do you define an urban area? What is the minimum population that is considered urban? I'm guessing there's not a specific definition there. I guess my suggestion would be to look at some of the ESS or system science projects that have been that are identified as examples. There's certainly interest in those specific examples. If you consider similar sorts of areas, you get a sense of what BER is considering important, but I don't think there's not a specific cutoff. As Sally said, it's really about these urban processes and identifying the science that you will gain by deploying near one of these centers. Thanks, Heath. Yeah, Heath has posted.
Thanks, you beat me to it.
A link to that ESS page. There's a link to that as well from the ARM AF call has a link to that information. But there's quite a bit of information about those projects there, which should be useful and
And I'm just thinking, one thing I didn't mention, there is an instrument list, and the communications team was nice enough to make sure all those links propagated through, so you can click into the instrument page. If there's something you want to know about that instrument and thinking about how close, sighting, how it actually works, there's context at the bottom of those page for the mentors, and that you can ask those questions. You can look in the handbook, but in case that is useful to you.
Heath called this out in his section, but he is a resource if you're thinking about a particular type of deployment in terms of what is possible. He's a great resource. He's done this many times now to help understand what we might run into. Sarah asked, do these annual facility calls typically come out each year around the same time of year, and how far? So the answer is yes. We're a little bit a few months off of the norm on this call. Typically, they come out about 2 months later. The whole thing is shifted by 2 months, but around the end of the calendar year is when they come out. And how far in advance of a desired deployment would one need to submit a proposal? So we do provide with this call, with each call, we indicate when is the earliest that the facility would be available. And typically we have 2 sets of dates there, one for domestic and one for international deployments. Now this one is focused on domestic, so that's more, that's not so relevant, but it's typically on there about 1.5 years or so, but that's called out in those proposals. Now, going the other way, don't want to go too far past that date because we don't like to have these observatories idle. So, sometime around the time of that's indicated as a start date would be ideal, or shortly after that. So September 24 is my proposals. So yes, I think the lead time is fairly typical. Now, I think one caveat there, not very pertinent to this call, though if there's an international deployment that involves partners, that may take additional lead time. And that's typically something you would want to be working on with those partners well in advance anyway. But that's going to add some time. And so, but for domestic deployment, I think what's listed there is very typical. And Sarah, if you had a more specific question about that, please let us know. Other questions? Happy to hang out for a few more minutes, but so want to take you away from other things if we're done. Do want to remind you that Nikki and I, and maybe he both showed at the bottom of all of our web pages there is this Ask Us link where you can reach out with questions. Also, Keith, Nikki, and my contact information are available through that organization page if you've got questions. Also introduce here, Rolanda Junt is on. She's our communication lead, public information director. She's also a good resource. And maybe that's something I don't think that we mentioned in our discussion of the mobile facilities, but for the facility that is for the team that is ultimately selected and awarded, Rolanda will work with the PI to help get information out about the campaign, provide materials, signage, etc., to help support that campaign. And Michelle Pritchard, another member of our communications team, has been providing lots of good information in the chat. Is asking if you would please fill out a short survey to help us know how to improve this going forward. This is something we started in the last call early this year, and I expect something we'll probably do in the future to to help people understand how to best engage with this, because we know it is a somewhat complicated process, and as a large organization, we want to help you engage. So the question from Steve: would not the emphasis on urban meteorology be facilitated by having an ancillary site nearby to draw comparisons about aerosols, rate effects, etc.? If so, what guidance can you provide about the optimal distance of the ancillary site from the city? So absolutely, we recognize the value in ancillary sites. We have some language in the call which I think, again, may be the first time we've done this, to really invite, we have had ancillary sites before, as Heath pointed out, for Houston and other times, but we recognize one of the hallmarks of an urban deployment will be the heterogeneity. And so we invite people to consider how that might be done. We provide some information to try to give a sense that there will be constraints on what we can do financially in terms of instrument availability, et cetera. We provide information about that. You asked, though, about optimal distance from the city. And again, I think I will defer to, I guess I would see that as a science question. So as you think about how do you plan to use these measurements for your science, that's going to come into your, how you see deploying the main facility as well as any ancillary measurements. So I would really turn that around and ask you to consider that distance. I guess I would also say, I think there's a perpetual balance in terms of what do you want ideally from a science perspective, and what can we provide optimally, from a logistics perspective. And we want to come to, the optimum arrangement between those two. There will be natural logistics constraints that may prohibit us from doing some things, but you need to tell us what you ideally need.
I would say that's a common siting discussion between PIs and operations is how close to something, how far, what are the source points of, impact? Do you want to be in the field of that source point all the time? Or do you want to intermittently be affected by it? Or do you want to not be affected by it all? So you really kind of have to back that out to get to where you want to put the instruments. It's a kind of an iterative process. But if you can tell us scientifically what you need out of that, that's really where we prefer to start.
So he provided you some parameters, recognizing that we can do some reconfiguration, we deploy on ships, but some instruments have certain requirements in terms of field of view. So putting something in a downtown business canyon is probably not going to work for some of these instruments. Never mind the fact that we'll probably not get permission to operate there. So I think you need to think about what you ideally want. Does it seem plausible? And then you can always reach out to us to ask if you're heading in a completely unrealistic direction. Yeah, so looking for advice coming from the UIFL sites, I'm not aware of anything specific like that. And I frankly have not seen the full detail of these projects. There are summaries you will find out on those proposals. ARM has really been, we have been tasked with supporting these projects, and this mobile facility point is a way we are doing that, but they're not necessarily those projects are not necessarily focused on the measurements that we provide. This AMF deployment will really supplement those projects.
Yeah, I would say one clarification is that, this call isn't for the urban IFL PIs alone. It's for anyone to propose, related to this. But if there is one of those groups that, you're targeting that urban area, please reach out with them. I know a lot of them would be very excited to have someone else maybe doing the AMF proposal related to this. I've heard that from them. I've heard others say other things, but don't limit yourself before you talk to somebody. So go ahead and jump out and talk to people and communicate and see where they're at with things. Because I know a lot of them have things planned, but they're months in, they're not, years in. So.
And Ken Davis in the chat, if you haven't seen it, offers to reach out if you have questions about the Baltimore deployment, and I expect that the other leads would also. But thank you, Ken. And as he says, they're just getting started on this. These were just awarded a short time ago.
Thanks, Ken.
Sally, is there anything you would like to add? In the spot, but
no, I don't have anything to add. I would just say, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well as to, to the ARM folks. we're always happy to answer questions.
Right. Well, thank you all for your participating and your attention. Yeah, please do let us know in the survey if there's any suggestions you have for how we can improve this for next time. But yeah, we definitely want to make this make sense to you, so we get good proposals, and this is an exciting process for us. Thank you, Katya. So we have another offer here for from Katya Lamar for the the Phoenix deployment, which I believe was just announced Monday. Thank you all. I think we will sign off here, but again, appreciate all of your participation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.